The first time Nora Hayes refused to serve Luca Moretti, 6 men reached beneath their coats. The entire diner went silent. Outside, rain struck the windows in hard silver lines, blurring the neon sign into a red wound against the Chicago night. It was nearly 2 in the morning, the hour when the city seemed to forget ordinary people still had to work, still had bills waiting on kitchen tables, still had tired feet and children asleep in cramped apartments. Nora stood behind the counter with a chipped coffee pot in one hand and a dish rag over her shoulder. The man seated in booth 7 did not look like someone who had ever been refused anything. He wore a black wool coat over a perfectly tailored suit. His dark hair was damp from the rain, though none of the men around him appeared willing to offer him an umbrella too late. He had not raised his voice. He had not introduced himself. He had only looked at Nora with a stillness that made the air feel thinner. "Coffee," he said. Nora glanced at the 6 men occupying the booths behind him. They had come in without ordering, blocking both exits and frightening the only 3 customers still inside. Then she looked back at him. "We're closed." His gaze moved slowly to the glowing open sign in the window. "No," he said. "You aren't. We are to you." One of his men shifted. Nora heard the soft scrape of leather and knew instinctively that his hand had moved towards something beneath his jacket. The stranger lifted one finger. Every man froze. He did not look away from Nora. "Why?" he asked. "Because your friends are scaring my customers." "They're not your customers. They were before you came in." A truck driver at the far end of the counter stared down into his soup, pretending not to listen. An elderly couple sat rigidly near the door, the woman clutching her purse against her chest. The stranger considered Nora for several long seconds. There was no irritation in his expression. That unsettled her more than anger would have. Most dangerous men needed everyone to know they were dangerous. This one seemed to assume the world already understood. "Tell them to leave," Nora said. A quiet sound came from one of the bodyguards. It might have been disbelief. The stranger leaned back. "All of them?" "All 6. And then you'll bring me coffee?" "Maybe." His eyes darkened with something that was not quite amusement. He turned his head slightly. "Outside." The 6 men obeyed immediately. No argument. No hesitation. Within seconds, they were standing beneath the diner's awning in the freezing rain. The elderly couple hurried toward the exit. The truck driver dropped money beside his bowl and followed. The diner emptied until only Nora, her coworker Cassie, and the stranger remained. Nora walked to booth 7 and set down a clean mug. "You could have just come in alone." "I rarely do. That sounds exhausting." She poured the coffee. His eyes remained on her face rather than the cup. "You're not afraid of me. I don't know you." That has never stopped anyone else. Before Nora could answer, the bell above the diner door rang. A man named Derek Walsh stumbled inside. Nora knew him. Everyone working nights knew him. Derek was a construction foreman when he was sober and a cruel drunk when he was not. That night, he was barely able to stand. His coat hung open, his face red from whiskey, and cold. He saw Cassie near the kitchen pass-through and grinned. "There she is." Cassie stiffened. "Derek, go home." He crossed the diner toward her. "You haven't answered my calls." "There's a reason." He grabbed her wrist. Nora set down the coffee pot. "Let her go." Derek looked over and laughed. "This isn't your business. It became my business when you touched her." The man in booth 7 remained motionless. Derek tightened his grip on Cassie. Nora walked around the counter. She was smaller than Derek by nearly a foot. He knew it. She knew it. So did the stranger watching them. But Nora did not slow. "Last warning." Derek shoved Cassie backward and reached for Nora. The stranger stood. He did not move quickly. He did not need to. The change in him was enough. Derek glanced over and went pale. For the first time, recognition broke through the alcohol. "Mr. Moretti." Nora stopped. The name meant something even to people who tried not to know what happened in the shadows of Chicago. Moretti, a family name attached to politicians, shipping unions, luxury hotels, construction companies, and bodies pulled from the river when winter ice began to melt. Luca Moretti stepped away from the booth. His face had become unreadable. "You were asked to let her go," he said. Derek released Cassie immediately. "I didn't know you were here. That is not the part of this evening you should regret." Derek swallowed. Luca's bodyguards had returned to the doorway. They stood in the rain behind the glass, waiting. Luca looked at Nora. "What would you like me to do with him?" The question chilled her. Not because she did not understand it. Because she did. "Nora med Luca's gaze." "Make him leave." One of the bodyguards looked almost disappointed. Luca did not. He turned to Derek. You heard her. Derek rushed out of the diner without his dignity and nearly without his coat. Cassie disappeared into the kitchen, shaking. Nora stood facing Luca, beneath the humming fluorescent lights. So, she said quietly, you're that Luca Moretti. That depends on which stories you've heard. None of them are good. Most stories are told by men who lost. He returned to the booth. Nora should have asked him to leave. Instead, she poured him fresh coffee. Luca stayed for 3 hours. He barely drank. He barely spoke. He watched Nora refill sugar containers, wipe tables, and sit with Cassie in the kitchen until her coworker stopped crying. He watched Nora divide the night's tips evenly, even though Cassie had spent the final hour unable to work. He watched her place leftover food into containers for the homeless man who slept near the train station. At 5 in the morning, the rain softened. Luca rose and placed several bills beneath his untouched cup. Nora looked at the money. It was more than she made in a week. She pulled out one $20 bill and pushed the rest toward him. I don't accept charity. It wasn't charity. You didn't eat anything. I paid for the view. That line probably works better in expensive restaurants. His gaze settled on her. Keep the money, Nora. She had never told him her name. The realization moved through her slowly. Luca saw it. Then he walked away. Black vehicles pulled from the curb one after another, disappearing into the rain. Nora remained by the window long after the taillights vanished. The next morning, she learned he had purchased the diner. Frank Coleman, the owner, gathered the staff near the counter at noon. His face looked gray beneath the lights. The building changed hands at 8 this morning, he said. New ownership takes effect immediately. Cassie looked toward Nora. Nora folded her arms. Who bought it? Frank did not meet her eyes. Moretti Holdings. No one spoke. Frank continued quickly. There will be renovations, pay increases, full health insurance. All outstanding payroll advances have been forgiven. Cassie made a small sound. The diner had allowed employees to borrow against future wages. It was how Frank kept half his staff from leaving. Nora owed nearly $11,000 after paying for her younger brother's rehabilitation treatment. Frank handed her a sealed envelope. Inside was a statement stamped paid in full. Nora stared at it. A black sedan waited across the street. Luca sat in the back seat. Even through rain-streaked glass, she knew he was watching. Nora tore the statement in half. Then she walked outside. Traffic hissed across the wet pavement. Luca's driver stepped out to open an umbrella. But Nora moved past him and knocked on the rear window. The glass lowered. Luca looked up at her. You bought my job. I bought a building. You erased my debt. It was an abusive employment arrangement. You don't get to make decisions about my life. I made a decision about my property. Her jaw tightened. Am I your property now? Something cold moved through his expression. No. Then stay out of my life. If I intended to enter your life, Nora, you would know. She leaned closer to the window. You knew my name before I told you. Yes. How? Luca's eyes remained steady. Go back inside. That isn't an answer. It is the only one you're receiving today. She stepped away from the car. I quit. For the first time, she saw his control crack not much, only a slight tightening near his mouth. No. Nora almost laughed. You don't decide that. You need the income. I'll find another job. You need health insurance for your brother. The words landed like a slap. How do you know about Ethan? Luca said nothing. Nora's anger transformed into something colder. What have you done? Nothing to your brother. What do you know about him? Enough. She stepped back. The window rose between them. The sedan pulled away, leaving Nora standing beneath the rain without an umbrella. That night, she quit anyway. By the end of the week, 4 restaurants had rejected her application after initially offering interviews. A hotel rescinded a job within an hour. A catering company stopped answering her calls. On Friday evening, Nora entered a small Italian restaurant near Lakeview and found Luca sitting alone at a table in the back. She walked directly toward him. You're blocking me from getting hired. He cut into his dinner with calm precision. I'm preventing you from walking into unsecured locations. Unsecured from what? He lifted his eyes. Sit down. No. Nora. Stop saying my name like it belongs to you. His knife became still. A server approached, saw Luca's expression, and immediately turned around. Nora placed both hands on the table. You have one chance to explain why you know about my brother, my debt, and every job I apply for. Luca studied her face. Then he looked toward the restaurant windows. Across the street, a silver sedan idled beside a fire hydrant. Walk out the kitchen, he said. What? Now. The restaurant lights went out. The first shot shattered the front window. Luca moved before Nora understood what was happening. He pulled her down behind the table as glass rained across the dining room. Screams erupted. Chairs overturned. More shots tore through the walls. Luca covered Nora with his body. His face remained terrifyingly calm. "Are you hurt?" "No." He reached beneath his coat and drew a pistol. Nora stared at it. "You carry that to dinner?" "I carry it everywhere." Two of Luca's men appeared from the rear corridor. "Kitchen exit is clear," one said. Luca kept one hand against Nora's back. "Stay between us. I'm not going anywhere with you." Another shot struck the marble column beside her. Luca's gaze became lethal. "This is not the moment to prove you're difficult." They moved through the kitchen as cooks crouched behind counters. Steam filled the air. Luca's hand never left Nora's waist. Outside, a black SUV waited in the alley. The moment Nora climbed inside, the vehicle accelerated. She twisted to look through the rear window. Two men emerged from the silver sedan, but Luca's security team blocked them. "Who were they?" she demanded. Luca sat opposite her. "Men who should not know your name." "But they do." "Yes." "Because of you?" His silence answered. Nora looked down and saw blood spreading across the sleeve of his white shirt. "You've been shot. Grazed. You're bleeding." "I've done it before." She stared at him. He was still watching her as though her fear mattered more than the wound in his arm. The SUV entered an underground garage beneath a glass tower on the Chicago River. Nora was escorted through a private elevator and into a penthouse that looked less like a home than a museum designed for a man who trusted no one. Dark stone. Tall windows. Almost no personal objects. A doctor arrived within minutes. Luca removed his jacket and sat at the kitchen island while the doctor cleaned the wound. Nora stood near the windows, arms wrapped around herself. Chicago spread beneath her in glittering lines. When the doctor left, Luca poured himself a drink. "Tell me everything," Nora said. "You're staying here tonight." "No." "Someone followed you from the diner 3 nights this week." Her stomach tightened. "The unfamiliar cars." "Yes." "You knew." "I had men watching your apartment." She turned. "You were spying on me. I was keeping you alive. Without telling me. If I had told you, would you have listened?" "No." "Exactly." She crossed the room. "You don't get credit for predicting that I wouldn't like being watched." His expression hardened. "You were seen with me. You came into my diner. And that was my mistake." The words seemed to cost him something. Nora noticed. "Why were you there?" Luca looked toward the windows. For a moment, the dangerous Mafia Boss disappeared, replaced by a man standing inside a memory he did not want to reveal. Then the distance returned. "You need sleep. I need answers. You will have them when I know who ordered the attack. That could take days." "It won't." There was absolute certainty in his voice. Nora should have been frightened by it. Part of her was. Another part remembered the way he had covered her with his body while bullets tore through the restaurant. She hated that part of herself. The guest room had no visible lock on the outside, yet 2 guards stood in the hall. Nora waited until after midnight, then slipped into the penthouse kitchen. Luca sat alone in the dark. His wounded arm rested against the table. A glass of whiskey remained untouched before him. "You don't sleep?" she asked. "Not often." "Because too many people want to kill you?" "Because I remember the ones who tried." She took a glass from the cabinet and filled it with water. "You knew where everything was," Luca said. "It's a kitchen, not a submarine." The corner of his mouth almost moved. Nora sat across from him. "Was the attack meant for me?" "I don't know." "You always say that calmly?" "Panic is rarely useful." "You nearly died." "No." "You were shot." "A bullet touched me. It did not nearly kill me." She looked at the bandage. "Does anything scare you?" His gaze lifted to hers. The silence stretched too long. Then he said, "Recently." Nora looked away first. The next morning, she found a file on the kitchen counter. Her name was written on the cover. Inside were photographs. Nora leaving the diner. Nora carrying groceries. Nora sitting beside Ethan during visiting hours at the rehabilitation center. Nora laughing with Cassie outside a laundromat. Dozens of images. Some dated back 3 years. Luca entered the room as she reached the oldest photograph. It showed Nora in an alley behind the diner, kneeling beneath the rain beside a man whose face was hidden by shadow. Her hands were pressed against blood-soaked fabric at his side. Nora remembered the night. A stranger had collapsed beside the trash containers after closing. He had been badly injured, barely conscious, refusing to let her call the police. She had held pressure against the wound and kept talking to him until a dark car arrived. She had never seen his face clearly. She looked from the photograph to Luca. That was you. Yes. You've been watching me since then. Yes. Her fingers tightened around the photograph. Why? Luca did not answer immediately. Rain moved across the penthouse windows, softening the city. I remember very little from that night, he said. The sound of tires. A knife. The cold. He moved closer. And your voice. Nora's heartbeat changed. You told me that if I died in your alley, you would be furious because you had already cleaned it. Despite herself, she remembered. I thought humor might keep you awake. It did. So you spent 3 years taking pictures of me? I made certain you were safe. That is not the same thing. No. The admission was quiet. Almost ashamed. Nora looked through the photographs again. You knew about Ethan. I knew he had become dependent on pain medication after his accident. I knew you worked nights to pay for his treatment. I knew Frank Coleman was charging interest on payroll advances. He never reported. You could have spoken to me. I did not intend to become part of your life. But you came to the diner. Luca looked at her. Someone left a message in my car that afternoon. What message? A photograph of you. Cold spread through her. With what? 3 words. He paused. Your debt remains. Nora understood then. She had not been his secret kindness. She had become leverage. Who sent it? I am finding out. And until then? You remain here. She shook her head. I have a brother who needs me. Ethan was moved to a private facility this morning. You moved him? He was at risk. Without asking me? There was no time. Anger rose through her so quickly that her hands trembled. You keep doing this. You keep changing my life and calling it protection. I am protecting you. You're controlling me. Yes. The answer stopped her. Luca stepped closer. His voice remained quiet. Because control is the only reason you are alive this morning. For one breath, they stood too close. Nora could see the faint scar near his temple, the exhaustion beneath his eyes, the rigid restraint in every line of his body. He lifted his hand as if to touch her face, then stopped. His fingers curled. He lowered his arm. That almost touch unsettled her more than anything else. Luca assigned Nora a guard named Matteo, a broad-shouldered man with a dry voice and unexpected patience. She was permitted to visit Ethan under heavy security. Her brother sat in a private room overlooking Lake Michigan. He looked healthier than he had in months. You look like you're being held hostage by a billionaire, Ethan said when she entered. Mafia Boss. That was my second guess. Nora sat beside him. Did anyone threaten you? No. They moved me before breakfast. The new doctors are good. That doesn't make this normal. Ethan studied her. Is he the guy from the alley? She stared. How do you know about that? You talked about him for weeks. I did not. You did. The mysterious dying man who vanished before the ambulance came. Nora looked away. I barely remembered him. Apparently he remembered you. On the drive back, Matteo received a call. His expression changed. The convoy altered direction. What happened? Nora asked. No answer. Matteo. He looked at her in the mirror. The penthouse was breached. Her stomach dropped. Luca? Alive. The convoy took her not to the tower, but to an old mansion outside the city. Snow had begun to fall despite the late season. Thin white flakes, melting against black gates. Inside, Luca stood in a candlelit study, with blood on his collar. Nora rushed toward him before she could stop herself. Are you hurt? His eyes locked onto her. No. She touched his collar and saw the blood belonged to someone else. Her hand fell. What happened? Someone entered through the service level using an internal security code. Someone in your organization betrayed you. Yes. A man stood near the fireplace. Older, silver-haired, elegant. Luca introduced him as Vittorio Moretti, his uncle and closest advisor. Vittorio smiled warmly at Nora. So this is the woman who refused Luca coffee. I eventually gave him coffee. A dangerous precedent. Luca's expression remained cold. Vittorio seemed amused rather than intimidated. He explained that a rival family, the Barones, had been pressuring Moretti territory for months. The photograph of Nora suggested they had discovered Luca's private surveillance. They want to create the appearance that Luca has become vulnerable, Vittorio said. A leader who places one woman above the family cannot remain leader for long. Nora looked at Luca. Then send me away. No, he said. If I'm the reason this is happening? 2. R. 2. End. 2. End. You are not the reason. You are the weapon they selected. Then remove the weapon. Luca crossed the room. There is nowhere I could send you that I would trust. That sounds like your problem. It is. His eyes held hers. And I will solve it. Vittorio watched the exchange carefully. That evening, Nora found Luca in the mansion's chapel. It was small, lit by candles, with dark wooden pews and stained glass turned black by the night. You don't seem religious, she said. I'm not. Then why are you here? My mother used to come here. Nora sat in the pew beside him, leaving space between them. What happened to her? She died when I was 16. I'm sorry. So was everyone who attended the funeral. That sounds lonely. Luca looked toward the altar. Power is lonely. You could give it up. No. Why? Because if I step away, men worse than me inherit everything. Nora studied him. You believe you're the good version of a mafia boss? No. His answer came without defensiveness. I believe I know exactly what I am. The honesty disturbed her. What are you? A man who has done unforgivable things for reasons that once seemed necessary. Once? His gaze moved to her. Necessity changes when you have something to lose. The air between them tightened. Nora felt the pull again, that impossible combination of fear and trust. You don't know me, she whispered. I know you give half your tips to women who need them more. I know you call your brother every morning even when he does not answer. I know you hate thunderstorms but stand outside during them because they make Cassie anxious. That isn't knowing me, that's surveillance. Then tell me something I could not photograph. She should have left. Instead, she said, I'm tired. Luca's expression shifted. Nora looked down at her hands. I'm tired of being the person everyone depends on. I'm tired of acting like I'm not afraid because someone has to keep moving. Sometimes I want one day where nothing falls apart if I stop. Silence filled the chapel. Luca's hand rested on the pew between them, not touching her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of it. You may stop here, he said. Nora looked at him. For how long? As long as you need. The gentleness in his voice frightened her more than his gun had. She stood quickly. This doesn't change anything. No, you still invaded my life. Yes, I still don't trust you. His eyes remained on hers. I know. The first kiss nearly happened 3 nights later. They were hiding in an underground jazz club after the mansion's security system was compromised. Music moved through the walls, while men loyal to Luca searched the city for the traitor. Nora wore a black dress selected by one of Luca's assistants because her clothes had been left behind. Luca had looked at her only once when she entered the private room. But that single look followed her everywhere. A woman named Bianca Barone arrived before midnight. She was beautiful, poised, and clearly familiar with Luca. Tu familiar. She kissed his cheek. Nora looked away. Bianca smiled. So the waitress exists. Nora, Luca said. This is Bianca. For mes fiancés, Bianca added. Nora's chest tightened in a way she resented. Luca's expression hardened. That arrangement ended years ago. Arrangements can begin again. Bianca explained that the Barone family would end the war if Luca agreed to marry her and publicly sever ties with Nora. You want peace? Bianca asked him. Send the girl away. Nora expected Luca to negotiate. He did not. No. Bianca's smile faded. You would risk Chicago for her? I would burn Chicago before I handed her to your family. The room went silent. Nora stared at him. Bianca left with a warning. When the door closed, Nora turned on Luca. You should have agreed. No. You could stop people from dying. They would kill you the moment you left my protection. You don't know that. I know, Bianca. Jealousy and anger collided inside Nora, apparently very well. Luca stepped toward her. This is not jealousy you're feeling. Don't tell me what I'm feeling. Then tell me. She backed into the wall. You announced to a room full of criminals that you would burn a city for me, then act like I'm irrational for wondering what else you've promised other women. His hand rose beside her head, bracing against the wall without touching her. I have promised you nothing. Exactly. His face moved closer. Music pulsed beneath them. I have never watched another woman for 3 years, he said. I have never memorized the times another woman's bedroom light turns off. I have never purchased a building because another woman refused me coffee. That isn't romantic. No. His gaze dropped briefly to her mouth. It is not. Nora could barely breathe. Then what is it? Luca's voice lowered. Something I have spent 3 years refusing to name. He almost kissed her. She felt the heat of his breath, the controlled tension in his body. The moment his restraint began to break. Then gunfire erupted above the club. Luca pulled Nora behind him. The private room filled with armed men. The attack came through the service tunnels. Luca led Nora through a hidden corridor while his security team exchanged fire behind them. The lights failed. Emergency lamps turned the concrete passage red. Halfway through the tunnel, an explosion threw Nora against the wall. When she opened her eyes, Luca was above her. Blood ran from a cut across his forehead. His hands moved over her arms, her shoulders, her face. "Look at me. I'm fine. Look at me." She did. The fear in his eyes was raw. Not fear for himself. For her. It lasted only a second before his control returned. But Nora had seen it. They escaped through a loading dock into the rain. Black SUVs surrounded the alley. Luca lifted Nora into his arms, despite her protests, and carried her through smoke and shattered glass. Cameras captured the moment. By morning, every news station in Chicago displayed the same image. Luca Moretti, carrying an unidentified woman while armed men shielded them. The scandal became public. Reporters found Nora's name within hours. They gathered outside Ethan's facility and the diner. Television hosts called her Luca Moretti's mistress. Others called her a hostage. Politicians demanded an investigation. Nora watched the coverage from a hidden safe house near the harbor. "I can't live like this," she said. Luca stood by the window. "I know. My brother can't live like this. He will be moved again. No more moving people like pieces." He turned. "What do you want me to do?" "Tell the truth." "Which truth?" "That I'm not your mistress. That you bought the diner because you were watching me. That your enemies are targeting me. That would make you appear more valuable, not less. Then say I mean nothing to you." Luca became very still. "It would protect me." "No." "Why?" "Because they would hear the lie." "Say it publicly." "No." Nora crossed the room. "You said you would do anything to keep me alive." "Yes." "Then humiliate me. Reject me. Make the world believe I was a mistake." His jaw tightened. "You are not a mistake. This is bigger than your pride." "It is not pride." "Then what is it?" Luca looked at her as though the answer itself were dangerous. Before he could speak, Matteo entered. They had found the traitor. Or so they believed. A Moretti captain named Carlo Vescari had sold internal security codes to the Barones. He was being held beneath one of Luca's warehouses. Nora insisted on going. "No," Luca said. "He knows why they're targeting me." "He may." "Then I want to hear it." "You will not enter that room. You can't keep shutting me out of decisions about my own life." Luca's expression turned cold. "This is not a debate." Nora stepped closer. "You don't want to protect me. You want to control every variable, because admitting you need anyone terrifies you." The words struck deeper than she expected. Luca's voice became quiet. "Do not mistake my restraint for permission to wound me." Nora's anger vanished, replaced by regret. But Luca had already turned away. She went to the warehouse anyway, concealed in Matteo's vehicle after convincing him that Luca would never forgive either of them if the truth emerged too late. Carlo was chained to a chair inside a concrete room. Luca stood before him without his jacket, sleeves rolled to his forearms. There was blood on his knuckles. Nora stopped in the doorway. This was the man beneath the expensive suits, the one who controlled Chicago through fear. Luca saw her. His face changed instantly. "What are you doing here?" Carlo laughed through swollen lips. "There she is." Luca turned toward him. Carlo continued. "The saint from the alley." Nora stepped into the room. "Why do they want me?" Carlo smiled. "Because you saw him." "Saw who?" "The man who stabbed Luca 3 years ago." Nora remembered Rain. A shadow moving away. A silver ring catching the light. Her gaze shifted toward Vittorio, who stood near the back wall. He wore a silver signet ring. The same shape. The same black stone. Nora's blood turned cold. Vittorio noticed her staring. So did Luca. Carlo began to laugh. The lights went out. Gunfire filled the warehouse. Matteo pulled Nora behind a steel column as men entered through both loading bays. Luca fired toward the shadows. Vittorio vanished. Carlo was shot before he could reveal more. By the time the attackers retreated, Nora understood the truth. Vittorio had orchestrated the assassination attempt against Luca 3 years earlier. He had also sent the photograph. Luca refused to believe it at first. "My uncle raised me." "He was in the alley," Nora said. "I saw his ring. You saw a shadow." "I remember." "You remember because Carlo suggested it." "Why are you defending him?" Luca's eyes flashed. "Because half my life is built on the belief that he protected me." Nora softened. "And if he didn't?" Luca looked away. "If he didn't, Then I have spent 15 years trusting the man who killed my father. The betrayal went deeper than either of them understood. Vittorio had not merely tried to kill Luca. He had manipulated the Moretti-Barone conflict, stolen money from both families, and arranged attacks designed to make Luca appear unstable. Nora was the final piece. Vittorio believed that if Luca publicly destroyed the empire for a waitress, the Moretti Council would remove him. If Luca abandoned Nora, he would lose the one person who had awakened something human in him. Either outcome weakened him. For the first time, Luca could not solve the problem through force alone. The Moretti Council demanded a meeting inside an abandoned church on the south side. They wanted Luca to surrender control temporarily until the scandal passed. Vittorio would preside. Luca prepared for war. Nora prepared to leave. She packed a small bag in the safe house bedroom. Luca found her near dawn. "Where are you going?" A federal contact offered witness protection. His face went still. "You spoke to the FBI. I spoke to someone who can move Ethan and me." "No. You don't own this decision. You will not disappear into a government system Vittorio can penetrate. You don't know that he can. I know what men like him can buy." Nora closed the bag. "I can't be the reason you destroy everything." "You are not. You're going to war with your own family. My family went to war with me. Because of me." Luca crossed the room and took the bag from her hand. She tried to pull it back. He held it easily. 3 years ago, he said, "I was bleeding to death in an alley. You had no reason to stay. You knew nothing about me. You remained anyway. That doesn't mean you owe me your life." "No." His voice lowered. "It means my life has not felt entirely mine since." Nora stopped fighting for the bag. Luca's control began to fracture. "I knew your work schedule because I needed to know when you were safe. I knew your debts because I wanted to remove every burden without forcing you to see me. I knew which window belonged to your apartment because some nights I sat across the street until your light went out." Nora stared at him. "That isn't healthy." "I know. You can't build love out of surveillance." The word love hung between them. Luca's face changed. Neither of them had used it before. Nora's voice trembled. "You don't love me. You're obsessed with the fact that I saved you." "Perhaps." The answer hurt. Then he stepped closer. "But I know the difference between gratitude and terror." "Terror." The idea of waking tomorrow and learning you are gone. His voice nearly broke. Luca Moretti, the man who could face bullets without blinking, looked at her as though she held the only weapon that mattered. "I do not know how to love you in a way that is clean," he said. "I do not know how to protect you without controlling the doors, the cars, the men outside. But I know that every future I can tolerate contains you." Nora's eyes burned. "You don't get to decide my future." "No." He placed the bag on the floor. Then he did something no one in Chicago would have believed. He knelt, not in surrender, in honesty. His injured hand rested against his thigh. "Choose it," he said. Nora could not move. "Choose what?" "Choose whether I am allowed in it." Her breath shook. She touched his face. The feared Mafia boss closed his eyes beneath her hand. When he stood, he did not kiss her immediately. He waited. Nora moved first. The kiss was restrained for only a second. Then 3 years of unspoken fixation broke open between them. Luca's hand settled at her waist, careful at first, then possessive when she pulled him closer. Nora felt the control he gave her, and the hunger he still refused to unleash completely. He stopped before either of them lost themselves. His forehead rested against hers. "If we survive tonight," he said, "you will still be free to leave. And if we don't?" His thumb moved across her cheek. "Then I will regret stopping." The council meeting began at midnight. The abandoned church stood beneath heavy rain, its stained glass windows broken, its stone saints worn faceless by time. Black vehicles surrounded the building. Nora was supposed to remain in a secured car several blocks away. Instead, she entered through the side chapel with Matteo. Vittorio stood near the altar, addressing 12 Moretti captains. Luca faced them alone. "You placed this family beneath the feet of a waitress," Vittorio said. "You burned alliances for her. You rejected peace for her. You exposed us to the FBI." Luca's voice remained calm. "I rejected a marriage designed by a traitor." Murmurs moved through the church. Vittorio smiled. "Your grief has made you paranoid. My father trusted you, and I loved him. You ordered his death." The church went silent. Vittorio's expression did not change. "Based on what evidence?" Nora stepped from the shadows. "My memory." Luca turned sharply. Anger and fear flashed across his face. Vittorio laughed softly. "The waitress remembers a ring in the rain? She remembers your voice too, Nora said. That was a lie. But Vittorio's eyes narrowed. Nora continued. You said Luca would never become the man Chicago needed while his father was alive. Vittorio's smile disappeared. The captains looked toward him. Nora had guessed from documents Matteo discovered in Vittorio's office letters describing Luca as weak beneath his father's protection. Vittorio reached inside his coat. Luca moved. Gunfire erupted. The church became chaos. Men overturned pews. Bullets tore through wood and stone. Luca crossed the aisle toward Nora, while Matteo covered her. Vittorio's loyalists opened fire from the choir loft. A bullet struck the column beside Nora. Luca reached her and pulled her down behind the altar. You were told to stay in the car. You were told I don't follow orders. This is not charming. I wasn't trying to be charming. Despite everything, something fierce and almost disbelieving moved through his eyes. Then, an explosion shattered the rear doors. Fire spread across the church entrance. Vittorio escaped through the crypt. Luca followed. Nora went after him. The underground corridor beneath the church was filled with smoke and candlelight from emergency lanterns. At the far end, Vittorio held Ethan by the collar. Nora stopped breathing. Her brother's face was bruised, but he stood. Vittorio pressed a gun against him. You moved him to a facility I selected, Vittorio said to Luca. You were always predictable when frightened. Luca raised his weapon. Release him. You will place your gun on the floor. Nora saw the trap. 2 men waited in the shadows behind Luca. She also saw a rusted valve along the wall connected to the church's old heating system. She moved slowly sideways. Vittorio noticed. Stay where you are. Luca's eyes remained on Ethan. He lowered his weapon. Luca, no, Nora said. He placed the gun on the floor. Vittorio smiled. There. The great Luca Moretti, unarmed for a waitress and a recovering addict. Ethan's expression hardened. Nora turned the valve. Steam exploded through the corridor. Vittorio fired. Luca moved through the white cloud. The sound of struggle filled the tunnel. Nora pulled Ethan toward the wall as shots struck stone. When the steam cleared, Luca had Vittorio pinned against the floor. His hands closed around his uncle's throat. Vittorio laughed weakly. Do it. Show them what she made you. Luca's grip tightened. Nora saw the murder in his eyes. She also saw what it would cost him. Luca. He did not respond. She stepped closer. Look at me. His gaze remained on Vittorio. Luca. At last, he looked up. Nora held out her hand. Don't give him the ending he wants. For several seconds, Luca did not move. Then he released Vittorio. Sirens sounded above the church. Federal agents flooded the tunnels. Vittorio smiled from the floor. You think prison will hold me? Luca stood. No. He looked toward the approaching agents. But your testimony will destroy every alliance you spent 30 years building. Vittorio's confidence finally broke. The evidence Luca had collected was released simultaneously to federal prosecutors, international financial authorities, and rival families. It implicated Vittorio in murders, money laundering, extortion, and the theft of millions from the Moretti organization. The empire did not survive unchanged. Luca dismantled its most violent divisions. He surrendered control of several operations and testified privately against officials who had worked with Vittorio. Some called it weakness. Others called it strategy. Nora understood the truth. Luca had destroyed the version of his empire that required him to remain the man Vittorio created. The diner burned 2 nights after the church confrontation. One of Vittorio's remaining loyalists planted an incendiary device beneath the kitchen. Nora arrived before the fire department. Flames filled the windows. Luca stood in the rain outside, his white shirt dark with water and soot. His men surrounded the block, but he appeared entirely alone. Nora ran toward him. Was anyone inside? No. Cassie? Safe. She looked at the burning building. It had been ugly, underfunded, and constantly one broken refrigerator away from closure. But it had been hers, the place where she had spent 5 years surviving. Luca held out a ring of keys. Nora stared at them. What are those? The property next door. What? I purchased it this afternoon. The diner is on fire. Yes. And you bought the building beside it? We will rebuild. She looked at him through the rain. We? If you allow it. Behind him, part of the roof collapsed in a storm of sparks. You're insane. I have been informed. You can't keep solving emotional problems with real estate. I am better at real estate. Despite the tears on her face, Nora laughed. Luca watched her as if the sound were something sacred. Then his expression became serious. The new diner will be yours. You already bought me one. I bought the first one because I was afraid. And this one? Because I believe you should have something no one can take from you. Nora closed her fingers around the keys. Luca stood before her in the rain, powerful enough to command cities and uncertain enough to wait for her answer. She stepped closer. You still don't get to choose my schedule. Agreed. You don't get to place guards inside without telling me. Outside? We'll discuss it. You will have health insurance. Luca, that is not negotiable. She shook her head. Then she kissed him while the old diner burned behind them. 6 months later, Hayes' Diner reopened on the same Chicago block. The neon sign had been restored. The booths were new, but Nora kept the old counter, including the small scratch where Luca had placed his coffee cup the first night. Cassie managed the morning shift. Ethan worked part-time while completing counseling and training as a peer recovery specialist. The staff received fair wages, full benefits, and no one owed money to the owner. Nora refused to name the diner after Luca. He pretended not to care. On opening night, snow fell softly over Chicago. The diner was filled with reporters, neighborhood families, and several uncomfortable-looking businessmen who had clearly never eaten fries beneath fluorescent lights. At midnight, the crowd thinned. Luca entered alone. No bodyguards. No black coat dripping rain across the floor. Only Luca, wearing a dark suit and the expression of a man entering the one place where power meant nothing. He sat in booth 7. Nora approached with a coffee pot. We're closed. He looked toward the glowing open sign. No, you aren't. She smiled. We're closed to you. His eyes softened. Why? Your friends scare the customers. I came alone. Then maybe I'll serve you. She poured his coffee. Luca placed a small velvet box on the table. Nora stared at it. If that is what I think it is, you should know I don't respond well to surprises. I am aware. She opened the box. Inside was not a ring. It was a brass key. To what? She asked. The penthouse. I already have a key. That key opens the elevator. This one opens the study. The room you never let anyone enter? Yes. Why? Luca looked at her. Because there should be no locked doors between us. Nora closed the box. That was almost romantic. I am improving. She slid into the booth opposite him. Outside, snow covered the dark cars along the street. Inside, warm light reflected across the windows. Luca reached for her hand. This time, he did not stop before touching her. His thumb moved over her fingers slowly, as if he still could not quite believe she was real. Do you regret it? Nora asked. What? The Empire. I regret what it cost. That isn't the same answer. No. He lifted her hand and pressed his mouth against her knuckles. I spent most of my life believing power meant having nothing that could be taken from me. And now? Now I know power is choosing what you are willing to lose everything for. The diner lights hummed softly around them. Nora looked at the man who had entered her life like a storm, who had watched her from the darkness, controlled her in the name of fear, and then learned slowly, painfully to offer his hand instead of closing his fist. She leaned across the table. You know this doesn't mean you can buy every place where I refuse to serve you. Luca's gaze dropped to her mouth. Then stop refusing me. Never. His smile appeared slowly. Rare, dangerous, entirely hers. Outside, Chicago remained cold, violent, and awake. But inside the diner, Luca Moretti sat beneath ordinary lights, drinking coffee that had finally gone cold. And for the first time in his life, he was not watching the door. He was watching her.